Arpad, thanks for joining the Tech Recruitment podcast. I'm super excited to welcome you here because you have experience with AWS firsthand. You are the AWS instructor, right? You
Correct.
you even changed career years and years ago from being a math teacher to a developer and now an instructor in AWS Cloud. So very exciting evolution. So we are going to talk about cloud, the application, the kind of projects on a high level that you've been working on, and also how you help others to make this career change. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Michael. It's good to be here.
Arpad, now with regards to your certification, the AWS instructor, I'm sure there are all these other certifications out there, and fellow recruiters may be also a bit lost with all of these. So, can you kind of tell us a bit more about the different levels and tiers of certifications?
Absolutely. When someone starts out with AWS, the first sort of entry level certification is called the Cloud Practitioner. Cloud Practitioner Essentials. So this one is the entry level, beginner level certification. So anybody who wants to start out with AWS, this is probably the best starting point. Then the next tier will be the associate level, where AWS has now four different certifications. So why four? Because AWS has different pathways. So for example, AWS has the architect pathway. The architect pathway is for those people who want to design AWS systems. As an architect, they need to know which service works with other services. They need to be familiar with virtual servers, serverless technologies, storage options, databases, and so on and so forth. So the Solutions Architect Associate certification will cover these concepts. The next step in the architect pathway is going to be the professional level, and that will be the Solutions Architect Professional exam. Now, this one is a very exhausting exam. So if you ask anybody out there, they will probably say that the Solutions Architect Professional exam is probably the hardest available AWS exam. The other associate level exams are the developer associate and the SysOps administrator associate exams. So again, we are talking about two different roles. So we are talking about the developer roles. So those developers who work with AWS, they need to prove that they know how to interact with AWS using their terminal or using their application. So how, for example, an application can upload files to an S3 bucket and how they can interact with databases through the code. So this is what the developer associate is about, how they can deploy an application to production. The SysOps administrator is not really developer focused, but there are more monitoring, observability, more configuration focused questions. And these two will merge into the DevOps engineer professional level. So again, that's the third level, the professional level. And here, a DevOps engineer professional needs to know all of these, of course. And there's a new associate level exam, and that's going to be the Data Engineer Associate, which is a brand new exam. It just went live last week, that's 12th of March. And here, people or IT professionals need to prove their knowledge in data engineering, databases, data lakes, which again will continue in some areas like machine learning, which is a hot topic today. And this is the fourth category, which is the specialty certification category. So machine learning is going to be one of them. Security engineers can select the security specialty. Networking engineers can choose the advanced networking. specialty exam. So again, AWS has these paths and which are based on roles that people have at companies. People who work with AWS at different companies.
Do I get it right that there are essentially three roles or sub roles? One is the data administrator who administers the databases, then the data engineer who migrates data from, I don't know, S3 or some data lakes. And then the third level is the analyst who analyzes the data put together by the other two people. So is it
Um,
merging into one?
we can say that, and these roles are always, always interesting because, for example, a software developer can be called like a software engineer, for example. So it depends. I think it depends how they call it. But anyway, even if I'm a data analyst, I still probably need to be familiar with some data lake knowledge, how I upload data to my data lake, uh, and in my opinion, this is the reasoning behind those certification getting retired and the new certification being added. So I would not separate these roles as much today.
Interesting. Well, interesting how the technologies kind of get together and converge into one role that is
Yeah.
supposed to kind of know it all. Interesting. And speaking of roles, what are some other roles that you see within the AWS ecosystem? You kind of mentioned a few based on the certifications. So is it right assumption that they kind of reflect the certifications?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So, companies, especially larger companies, I'm not talking about startups now, but enterprise level companies, uh, they employ solutions architects, for example. So, solutions architects design a new system. So, for example, let's say that the company needs to develop a new product. Then the solutions architect will sit down with the product manager and the solutions architect will design which services will be in that product, which services will serve that product based on the number of users, based on the traffic patterns, how we can scale those services. So solutions architect is a really great role, especially if someone is interested in planning, designing, drawing diagrams. So that's all about solutions architecting. Developers obviously still need to be familiar with AWS because our applications need to interact with the cloud, right? So my application again needs to save data to the database, needs to get data from the database, needs to upload a file to an S3 bucket, or needs to interact with other AWS services. So developers need to be familiar with cloud as well. We also talked about security engineers. Now, these are the people who are probably the most strict at a company. So they will configure our access to the AWS accounts. Okay, you have access to this and this and this service, but the other person does not because they don't need it. So, for example, not everybody needs access to a production account. It's only administrators needs to access the production account, or maybe top level engineers need access. So, for example, a junior engineer does not necessarily need access to a production database, right? Because we never know what happens. So this is what the security engineers do on one end. The other role is to configure infrastructure protection, data protection. So this is a really exciting topic uh, from the security perspective. And we can talk about network engineers as well. So again, we are talking about large enterprise level companies here who have presence all around the world. For example, they have applications running in multiple different regions, which are geographically dispersed. in the US, Europe, and Australia for disaster recovery purposes or for high availability purposes. So network engineers need to ensure that these applications can communicate with each other effectively. On the other hand, if the company still has, for example, an on-premises data center because of compliance or legal requirements, they can't move their data to the cloud, or they are not there yet to migrate to the cloud. But they need to connect that on-premises data center to AWS, to the cloud. Now that's a really challenging task for a network engineer. A really nice task.
Hmm. Interesting. Well, there are so many different roles, which kind of also reminds me in web development, they have either the generalists who are kind of full stack engineers and they can do everything, and they have the front end developers, back end developers, UI, UX designers. So you kind of mentioned the larger enterprises that have
Mhm.
roles very strictly separated. What's going on in those smaller companies, on the other hand? Do they have some generalists as well, where they kind of can do everything, but maybe not as well?
Yeah, that's interesting. So my experience is that smaller companies, like startup companies, they need people who can do everything. You mentioned full stack development, yeah. So these companies, from my experience, usually hire full stack engineers. So I used to work for startup companies, so I know that I had to do Node.js at the back end, and I had to do React at the front end. And the same with cloud. So these companies usually don't or can't afford to hire just one person who can design the entire AWS cloud architecture. So probably developers need to do that, or maybe the team lead or the lead developer who's probably more experienced than others. So I would say that smaller companies mm, tend to hire more tend to hire people who have general knowledge instead of special knowledge. Again, the disadvantage is that you can't know everything. I don't know everything, and that frustrates me. But I don't know everything, and the problem is that um, obviously the design that's people who don't have that much expertise in that particular area might not be as good as if it was done by someone whose specific role is that. But when we when we just create an MVP, we probably don't even need that. So if the startup company is successful, they will evolve into a larger company anyway, and they will afford to hire specialists later during the course.
Mhm. Interesting. How it all kind of works in smaller and larger organizations with different roles.
Absolutely.
Nice. Okay, and just a while ago, you also mentioned serverless
Mhm.
with regards to some of the roles. So if a recruiter doesn't really know what is the difference between a cloud and serverless, like what would be the easiest way to kind of explain it?
Yeah, sure. Uh, I will start with the traditional data centers. So when uh, when we went to the office even like 10, 15 years ago, then there were those secret rooms where only two or three people could go into. So these rooms had the servers where our computers were connected to and where our databases run. Now, when we move to cloud, the first natural step is to imitate that infrastructure in the cloud. And the way we do this is that we can run virtual servers. So we run virtual servers. Basically, we do not own those servers. We do not own the hardware, the physical machine, because AWS owns those physical machines, but we still manage those servers. We still decide if we want to run Windows or Linux on those servers. We still need to update them. We still need to patch them. I still need to patch my MySQL database, for example.
Mm.
on these servers. Um, Now, the next step is going to be the managed services, which means that AWS takes over a large chunk of that management, and companies only need to worry about what really matters, and that's basically the application and the data itself. And the very top level is just the serverless. The serverless means that obviously there are servers.
Yes.
These applications don't run in the air somewhere, but the serverless means that again there are no servers to manage. So AWS will take over. So what they usually call that is the undifferentiated heavy lifting. So this is what AWS takes over because my customers won't care how I manage my servers, or how many data engineers, or how many sysops administrators I have. My customers only care about the outcome. Will the application does what I need or not? This is what customers care about. So with serverless, AWS will take over almost everything, almost every management overhead, and I really need to just write a code. In terms of a database, it's already there. I just need to save the code and need to download the code. S3, for example, is a great example. It's a storage service. Again, it's a serverless service. Just click the button. I uploaded it to S3. If I want to download it again, click the button.
Oh, it sounds so easy these days that we can also wonder what do all of these cloud engineers actually do now when Amazon takes care of everything. Like it's kind of surprising to see that we all need like all of these cloud practitioners and sysops and DevOps engineers. I mean, it should be easier, by the definition of serverless, and it looks like it's more and more complicated on the other hand.
Absolutely, I 100% agree with you. So uh, there are still subtleties. I still need to ensure that not anybody accesses my servers. Even I mean my application that runs on a server which I don't manage. But I still need to ensure that I restrict access to my application. I still need to ensure that I restrict access to my database. If I need to meet some compliance requirements, I still need to encrypt that data in my database. So there are lots of tasks left, even if we don't actually manage those servers. So I personally love serverless because it really enables me to focus on what is important, and that's writing quality application, writing quality code, and we don't really have to watch all these vulnerability newsletters, and okay, now that operating system now has a vulnerability, so let's just update 1,000 servers now. So
Mhm.
it's a great innovation.
Interesting. Well, and I'm kind of now wondering what's next because serverless has been here for a while, even though some companies are just discovering it. And you were kind of elaborating on the different levels or steps, from the standard data center through the cloud, managed
Mhm.
cloud, and then serverless. I mean, like, what's coming next? Like, what do you, based on your experience, kind of see as something really exciting that Amazon is planning?
Well, that's a great question. I think serverless will be here for a while, and it will just take larger and larger slice out of the
Mhm.
entire cloud space. Now, the hot topic today is obviously AI and machine learning. So, especially generative AI. So that's probably what is the hot topic now. I presume that this is the direction that we will move towards to in the next couple of years. So we will be able to use Gen AI to help us writing code, uh, getting recommendations with regards to a specific architecture requirements, for example.
And on this note, now, do you think companies will need experts in Gen AI, or is it mostly the cloud providers such as Amazon, Google? like they have the capacity, they have the solutions, they have the products that they offer to companies to implement through some APIs. So do companies actually need the Gen AI specialists going forward?
Uh, uh, well, it depends. It depends. Um, there are services available now where I just write my requirements in plain English. And that service will, for example, spit out the code for me. So, for example, if I'm not familiar with React, I'm just saying something, but I write that, okay, create a React component that does this, 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 and this. And that service will spit out the code for me. So it will increase our productivity. It will increase developers and probably later other specialists' job over the next couple of years. Gen AI specialists, on the other hand, I think are needed when probably more needed when we want to create a new product that are, for example, machine learning based product. So if I'm a startup and I want to work on a, on a on a new feature that is based on artificial intelligence and machine learning, yeah, I will probably need a Gen AI specialist. I will need a data engineer that who will know what to do with the data in my data lake. So again, the question is not. I don't think I can give you a straight yes or no
Mhm.
answer. I think for a while,
Mhm.
both lines will be there in the next
Yeah,
couple of
yeah.
years.
Well, these are really hard questions. Like no one knows, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Time will show. Time will show.
Yeah,
Okay, wonderful. And you also mentioned, or I mentioned at the beginning, that you transitioned from the math high school teacher to
correct.
being a developer. And then,
Mhm.
what was the transition like? And what can you recommend others who may also look at cloud as something super exciting and they don't know what to do and how to start?
Yeah, so I used to be a mathematics teacher, and I still love teaching. So that's why I'm currently an instructor. But now I do AWS teaching instead of mathematics. So what I did back then is that I started to create side projects or hobby projects that were they were developing focused projects, obviously, back then, and then I put that out. I put that out public, and then companies started to find me after a while. And then I went to some interviews, and after a couple of interviews, I got to the level, my knowledge got to the level so that I could get my first tech job. So I could transition from teaching into development, web development. And that was the point when I got to know AWS, and then I just said to myself, okay, I want to learn this. So I immediately knew that I want to do this. So I started to build my skills. Actually, the Cloud Essentials certification was not available back then in 2017. So I started with the Solutions Architect Associate. So I
Wow.
said that okay, I want to do that certification because I want to prove that I can do some basic AWS design and I'm familiar with some AWS services and I want to learn that. So I kind of forced myself into studying and experiencing. I did a lot of practical exercises. I opened an account for myself. It's free, so anybody can do that. And I just did some exercises in my account that could help me to be more familiar. And then these were the first steps, and then the rest just followed.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's just so inspiring. Once you are already on the job and you get your hands dirty with some project and you work in a company, it's always easier to get the second and third job. But the transition
Absolutely.
from being the high school teacher to getting the first job, that must have been also exciting, right? Especially, I kind of assume once you get your new salary, you were looking at like, oh my gosh, I used to earn this as a high school teacher. No, was it like this or no?
It's not just the salary. Yeah, of course. Yeah. So there's no secret about that. So obviously, IT pays better than
Mm,
education, for sure. But what I liked in IT, and especially in web development, and still like in AWS, is that it's about problem solving.
mm,
So when you write code, there is a problem. Okay, you need to code this and this and this. And then you just write, I don't know, 15, 30, 100 lines of code, whatever it needs to be. Same thing with AWS. Okay, we have a situation. Let's say that I want an application where there are authenticated users, and there are guest users. How do you solve that? So again, in my perception, this is about problem solving, and this is what I like, and
mm,
that's why I love IT, and I love cloud. But yeah, in the beginning, it wasn't easy. So there were
mm.
late nights and early mornings, obviously. So I had to do two things, and plus three kids there. So that was a bit how to say that, difficult. But
Mhm.
then they obviously, once you can make the switch to the area that you want, then it will become easier, because you can do that from 9 to 5 or 9 to 6 or whatever the required hours are.
Awesome, wonderful. Well, that's just so inspiring. So,
Thank you.
before we wrap it up, I'm kind of wondering, what would be your advice for other technical recruiters out there? Because you are probably being approached by recruiters here and there, and you saw some good examples, bad examples. You had some interviews. So, is there any kind of advice that you would like to share with fellow technical recruiters?
That's a great question. I think if someone wants to prove their AWS knowledge to you, then it's probably a good idea to ask for a certification, even just a beginner level certification, just like the cloud practitioner, because that shows some interest.
Mm,
Now, technical recruiters probably don't do technical interviews, so that's the job of the company itself. So they can't really check how. They can't really check what the accurate level of knowledge of the candidate is. So that's why I might say that it's a good idea to ask for
mm,
some type of certifications, which is an objective way for the candidate to prove that, okay, hey, I know at least some level of clouds, or at least I'm interested, even if I don't have a cloud job.
yeah,
Because
yeah,
uh, in my opinion, the human side is at least as important as the technical side, because we can learn almost everything.
yeah, yeah.
Right.
So
So if I could learn that at the age of 42, when I got my first tech job, then anybody can do that.
mm,
Personally, I would probably work with someone who wants to learn, who wants to prove that, okay, I want to do this, than a genius who's, for example, like an arrogant person.
mm,
So the human side and personality, in my opinion, is at least as important as the technical side, if not more
yeah.
important than the technical side.
Yeah, yeah, so true, so true. Awesome. Well, your insights are awesome for technical recruiters, but also for people who are transitioning, from some other fields, education or others as well. IT is exciting. Where can people find you on social media or online or LinkedIn? Is there any link that we could include in the show notes or on YouTube in the comments?
Absolutely, I'm available on LinkedIn, and I'm very happy to help anyone. So just yeah, connect to me on LinkedIn. Yeah, send me a message. I'm very happy to help, as long as I have capacity to do so, because I know how difficult it is to transition from something else. So I'm again very happy to share experience with those who are interested.
Very cool. So I'll include the link.
Yeah,
Wonderful.
sure.
Great. Thank you. Thanks for joining. It's been very nice learning from your experience, and thanks for sharing the insights.
Thank you, Michael, for having me.
Thanks.